Easy now. Papa got beats making headlines.
Come down. Ooh, you make my high come down. Always tripping when you come around. Never have to cut you off like right now. You see, I don't have to drive me. You can say that for your mama. Maybe you should smoke some. Me try to mail hard. I was loving you good. The vibe was straight. So you a couple of things and they feeling strange. I treated you right. Everything was a gift from a time to your bag and a color on your lip. Yeah, you plenty of
Welcome to the Seahawks Man to Man podcast, powered by The Athletic. Shout out to the company. My name is Michael Sean Dugar. I'm here with my co-host, Christopher Kidd. Make sure you follow us both up on the tweet machine. You guys know where to follow me. I'm verified. Sadly, Twitter is no longer doing verifications at the moment, so we can't get Chris verified. But that's all right, man. Talk to him.
At this point, I'll when I get verified, whenever that will be, hooray. But you can follow me on Twitter at CKIDD206, and that's CKid206.
All right, this is our first installment of our NFC West Roundup, where we're talking to a beat writer who covers all three teams in the division, obviously outside of the Seahawks. First up is the homie who covers the 49ers for The Athletic, Matt Barrows. Matt, welcome to the podcast. Nice to see you on the podcast for the first time.
Yeah, nice to see you guys too. I finally get to see Christopher. A couple of handsome guys over there. I got to say.
I be forgetting sometimes that you guys, when we have you guys on the show, you guys haven't met Chris, because we all meet in press boxes. So it's a lot of you guys' first time seeing Chris, and even though he's not verified.
Yeah. We've had a beat writer that went unverified for the longest time, Eric Branch, and that sort of became his thing. It almost became better that he wasn't unverified because he became known for that. But I feel like I've talked to Chris, I don't know, dozen times. I don't know how long we've been doing this, but it doesn't feel like I'm meeting him for the first time.
Well, let's kick this thing off. Actually, before we do that, we're talking about the Niners. Plug the book one more time. I know we plugged it last time you were on, but plug your book.
Well, yeah, plug it as much as possible. We got Father's Day coming up. It would be a good Father's Day gift for all the 49ers fans out there. It's a book about basically this century of the 49ers, a really kind of roller coaster century. They've been to the Super Bowl twice. They've had two win teams, so they've been quite up and down, and a lot of it kind of revolves around the Jim Harbaugh teams, which had, as you know, a lot of personality and a big rivalry with the Seahawks, and I feel like with John Lynch in charge, John Lynch is such a nice man, likes everybody. He gets along well with John Schneider. We don't quite have that level of animus that we had 10 years ago at this point.
Let's get into some football. Julio Jones. He's the number one topic right now. When you think NFL, you're thinking Julio Jones. Where's he going to go? The NFC West is looking like it's a hot landing spot for Julio. Can the Niners pull this off? And ultimately, what would it cost if Julio Jones ends up with the 49ers?
They can pull it off. From a salary cap standpoint, they certainly can. I just wonder, there was a report last week about there being a first-round pick on the table. I'm not sure that's the case, but if it were, the 49ers are obviously out. I mean, they gave away their first-rounders in 2022 and 2023. They gave away a future third-rounder. They don't have a lot to play around with after that big move up and in which they got Trey Lance. So there's that working against them, and there's the fact that sometimes these teams don't want to deal good players in the conference, and I wonder whether the Falcons would do that. I think the Falcons are probably not in that category because they see themselves as rebuilders and not as contenders right now, so it probably wouldn't bother them that much. They'll be looking for the highest compensation, but the 49ers can't hang in a bidding war when it comes to compensation. Now, I do think that they could use a guy like Julio Jones, a veteran receiver. They've got a couple of good young guys in Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, and after that, there's really not a lot there. So finding a third guy, a veteran guy for that offense, I think would be something that the 49ers are interested in. I just don't know how aggressive they can be if it starts to get into a bidding war.
Where do you see Julio ending up? I guess is my final question. Do you think he'll end up with the Niners, with the Cardinals? Is he going to end up somewhere else? What is your take on this with everything going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a total guess, but just from a fit standpoint, outside the conference, Tennessee seems like
Mm.
a spot. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know what Julio's druthers seem to be. He wants to play on a contender, so that would fit that. The Titans aren't a big passing team, so his stats wouldn't be through the roof. But I think that at this point in his career, winning a Super Bowl is probably paramount for him. So Tennessee just seems like a real nice fit. I mean, I would love that triumvirate they'd have between quarterback, running back, and receiver if they got him there.
Actually, one more Julio to the Niners question. In Seattle, I feel like a lot of team fan bases that don't think their team needs Julio have like a I don't know. It's not like delusions of grandeur or anything. They just have a misguided view of their team's current receivers.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if that's the case in Seattle because obviously DK and Tyler are as good as people think. But how is that going among the San Francisco fans and like their assessment of the current receivers versus their assessment of the need for Julio?
Yeah, you're talking about hometown myopia. Like people get fixated on their own roster, and they tend to overestimate it. We see that all the time around cut down day when people say, "Oh, they can't cut this guy; he'll get snapped up by another team," and the guy never does. You know, it's just because you've been reading about that one guy all off season. So I think there's that going on with the 49ers. But like I said, it's just a numbers game really at receiver. They've got two, one of whom, Deebo Samuel, gets hurt quite a bit. And after that, it's a bunch of question marks. So there is certainly room on the roster for Julio. And then the counterpart of that is that he's a big name. He's a ESPN name. And so fans recognize it and they want that guy part of the team. So I think it would be a great fit. I mean, he's played for Kyle Shanahan before. I think he had his best season ever under Kyle Shanahan. So it would be an easy fit on this team.
Yeah, I know it's scary for our listeners to be thinking about right now is talking about Julio on the 49ers are kind of Kyle Shanahan, but just that aspect of it has been interesting to see which fan bases are like, we don't need Julio, we have blank. And some of these blanks, man, like I think in San Francisco, I've seen like, we got Brandon Ayuk, we're good. And it's like, look, man, I like that guy too.
He's great. He's a young stud.
It's Julio Jones, you know?
Right, and like I said, it's numbers. Most teams line up three receivers, so if you don't have three, you can't go three deep. You need that extra guy.
Let's talk about the quarterbacks here, man, which was like the biggest topic of the offseason for almost every team, really, but specifically San Francisco. I remember reading your stories in like early January, late December, where Kyle Shanahan was like, "No, Jimmy G's our guy." There was like an endorsement of him, and then they trade the farm to move up. And eventually get Trey Lance. So what happened in between maybe week 17-ish when Kyle said that and March 26 when they pulled the trigger on the blockbuster deal?
Everything happened. I mean, they looked at a lot of different scenarios. I mean, they're a team that makes a lot of phone calls. That's why I think the Seahawks are the same way. Mm-hmm. Their business model is to see what's out there and to kick the tires on just about any type of scenario. They want to know what's going on. A lot of times they're not poised to make a move. Like they were in on Matt Stafford, but they weren't all in. They weren't part of the final conversation, but they wanted to know what it would take. And I think that leads to a lot of, I don't want to call them false reports, but they're not quite as serious as it's reported because they have made a call. They are interested, but they're not really interested in that. So I think there was a lot of that going on. And it wasn't just Stafford. It was Deshaun Watson. At one point they were looking at a couple of veteran Andy Dalton, for example. So if they had brought in Andy Dalton in free agency, I have a hard time believing Jimmy Garoppolo would still be here. I think Andy Dalton was part of like the Trey Lance idea that you would have a veteran who could run the offense for a year and then Lance would come in. So this idea that they were always going to go with Garoppolo, always loyal to Garoppolo, I think is convenient for them now, but I don't think that was always the plan. I think it could have gone in a lot of different ways. They're paying the guy $26 million this year. So I think that was very much an option to find an alternative to him, and then to kind of bring that rookie along slowly. So that's where we are. And Lance is really interesting. He was the guy that I liked from the get-go. I mean, I started watching him after Garoppolo got hurt last September, really, because I thought he would be a guy who would be available in the second round, because he hadn't played that much, was playing at North Dakota State, wasn't going to play a lot in 2020. And I thought, okay, maybe this is a guy that, they could get late in the first, early in the second, and develop. Of course, with quarterbacks, they're always valued so highly. And so he ends up being the number 3 overall pick.
Oh, before I want to get into Trey too, but at the same time, how do you explain kind of the Mac Jones smoke that we got between March 26th and the drafts? Because I feel like everyone was convinced that that's the direction they were going.
I can't explain it. I don't know what the answer is, but that smoke was thick. There's some thick smoke coming out of that Mac Jones habitation. And, I'm not blaming this reporter, but Adam Schefter was reporting confidently that it was going to be Jones. And it wasn't the usual, I think it might be Jones. There wasn't a lot of hedging early on. It was a confident, it's going to be Mac Jones. And, reporters are wrong all the time, but Adam Schefter's got a very, very strong reputation. And when it's 2 months out and you're that confident, I figured he knew something. And I think a lot of people did. And he wasn't the only national reporter reporting that. So there was something going on there. I'm not exactly sure. I don't want to try to guess who his sources were. But it was enough to convince me that, okay, it's probably going to be Mac Jones. I mean, I like Trey Lance, but it looks like it's going to be Mac Jones with this pick.
So I had a theory about that because I had heard it was going to be Mac. Like the day the trade went down, like I heard some people like, hey, they've already even told Mac that they're interested in them. So yeah, like you said, the smoke was really thick there. I had a theory that maybe they were conflicted with internally, like maybe Kyle likes a guy and John likes a guy, or something like that. Think there's anything to them maybe going back and forth between the two of them on which guy they would like at number 3 overall?
Well, according to them, they met each other late in the process and said, on the count of 3, tell me who you like. 1, 2, 3, Trey Lance. And it was like this beautiful thing. I don't believe for a second it was that easy. If Kyle, I mean, that was the whole kind of narrative, that Kyle Shanahan likes the traditional pocket drop back quarterback. Kirk Cousins is one of his favorite guys. He's made no secret about that. And Mac Jones had a lot of Kirk Cousins in him. So that was what, helped convince everybody that was going to be the pick. My point is that if he calls the shots, especially when it comes to quarterback. So if that was the guy all along, it would be Mac Jones here in San Francisco instead of Trey Lance. So that makes me think that it wasn't quite as certainly as cut and dry as it was being portrayed up to that point. But you have to think that there was disagreement back and forth in the organization. It seemed to be, I was following this really closely from the get-go. It seemed to be that people who were personnel types, like our draft guru and other draft gurus were all pointing to Trey Lance early on. That was their favorite guy because he was so moldable, had all these great qualities that you could kind of draw out of him over time. It was the guys who were the reporters who, talked to a lot of people, talked to a lot of teams who were going Mac Jones. So there always seemed to be that dichotomy there about who is predicting what. And there seemed to be kind of a separate line between the two.
I want to stick with Trey Lance here. And I'm curious from your standpoint, is how do you see Trey fitting in and what can he bring to this offense that maybe Jimmy doesn't bring?
Yeah, I think he's a great fit. I mean, he did a lot of things at North Dakota State that he's going to be asked to do here. So in that way, it wasn't a real hard projection. It was a hard projection in that there were only 17 games and they were coming against, Illinois State and Delaware and other smaller schools. The the really easy part was that it was a lot of play action, a lot of rollouts. North Dakota State uses a fullback. I mean, you hardly see that in the NFL, and you see that even less in college football. And here was a team that used its fullback steadily, 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends, a lot of stuff that the 49ers do. He does. To answer your question, though, he throws the ball deep. That's one thing that Jimmy Garoppolo just does not do. He doesn't stretch the field. He's not real accurate when he does, and we saw that in the Super Bowl at the end of the game. And the other big thing, bigger than the arm, is that he runs the ball, and he runs the ball well. He runs it with power, and that was a staple of North Dakota's State's offense. He would take the snap under center, shotgun, and right up the A gap. I mean, right up the middle, and he would run guys over. He's not going to be able to do that here, but there's a power element to him. Some of the other draft picks that they took in this draft, Aaron Banks is a big 320-pound guard who plays with power. So there's a little bit of power element that's come into the 49ers in the last few months. And I think we'll see that right off the bat. I think that Trey Lance comes in for at least a few plays, certainly around the goal line, maybe short yardage. And that makes, defenses guess, are they going to run the ball in, or are they going to try to throw it? And Trey Lance can do both. I don't think for a second that he's going to be a quote unquote running quarterback in the NFL. He wasn't that at North Dakota State, but I think that's job one for Kyle Shanahan, is to really develop him as a passer. And I think that was the allure, is that he has that. He processes quick. He's a smart guy. He had a lot of responsibilities at North Dakota State. And I think all of those things really appeal to Kyle Shanahan.
What specifically did you learn about Trey Lance's football IQ in the pre-draft process, and how much did that factor into the Niners falling in love with him?
Yeah, that was a big part of it. I mean, you talk to the coaches up there, you talk to his teammates, you talk to his quarterback coach, Quincy Avery, and they put more on his plate than any quarterback has. I mean, he had responsibility for the protection. He had audible responsibility. He had the mic call. He had, everything that a pro quarterback has, probably even more, because, the 49ers, give that protection stuff to the center. He had that at North Dakota State. So he was a 19-year-old. I think he was 19 in 2019. Might have been even 18 years old. And he's the starter all of a sudden, and hadn't played much because he was a redshirt freshman the year before. And he has all this responsibility, and they go undefeated. And he doesn't throw an interception. So that's, there was a lot to like there. And the big hang up with him was that he didn't play in 2020. So there wasn't any more film to watch, and there wasn't any ability to see, okay, is he going to get even better, more efficient from what he was in 2019? And that's the big projection. It seems like a safe one because he is so dedicated. I mean, the fact that he was able to pick up that offense so quickly and run it so well, that seems to bode really well for his NFL future.
You've already hinted at what you foresee happening with Trey Lance and Jimmy G, that maybe perhaps Trey will come in certain situations on the goal line. So for week one, it's pretty, you're going on a limb saying that for the most part, you see Jimmy G as being the starting quarterback for this football team.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'd have to screw up pretty dramatically, and he's motivated this year. I don't foresee that happening. I think it's possible that Lance accelerates faster. Jimmy G has an issue. He throws a lot of picks. He's had some horrific training camp practices. To me, that's not enough. I think certainly by week one. Are they struggling at week 8? They have their bye week 6. Those are all kind of, as you guys know, points at which a change could be made, I suppose. And there's always the injury issue, which is probably the greatest reason, most likely reason that they would make a change at this point. But it did surprise me a little bit. We've only watched 2 practices with Trey Lance. One was a rookie minicamp, and one was the first OTA. And only two quarterbacks really took throws in that practice, and it was Jimmy G on one field and Trey Lance on the other. I thought that there might be some. I mean, obviously Trey Lance is the number 2. I thought there might be some kind of take him along slowly and have one of the other veterans be the de facto number 2 for now. That's not happening. He's being thrown 2 feet into the fire, and so far it's been pretty impressive. He looks the part. I guess is what you can say after just a few dozen throws, but he's looked pretty good so far.
I'm a proponent of starting your first round QB as soon as you can, especially if he's sitting behind a guy you don't think is the future. And we don't necessarily have to debate that idea here, but it does feel like part of the argument against doing that with Trey is that the team is currently set up to win with Jimmy G, with the talent on the offensive line, the skill position guys, and what they're supposed to have on defense. But when I think about that, it seems like that would be an ideal situation to ease your rookie into as well. When he does have Trent Williams, when he does have George Kittle and Ayuk and, superstar Deebo Samuel, and they got all these guys. Do you think that if Trey was to, let's say he was the week 1 starter, I get the sense he wouldn't be in over his head and he'd have a decent supporting cast, his rookie year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, this is a good running team as it is now. So just on that alone is such a nice foundation, even if you don't have the whole offense down pat. I mean, I agree with you. I think that they would be hard to deal with too, because so few teams do run as much as they would be capable of in that situation. I remember Colin Kaepernick's first ever start. It was against the Bears. I think it was a Monday night game. And to that point in that season, that was 2012, he had mainly run the ball. He was sort of a change of pace to Alex Smith. He would come in for 2 or 3 plays a game, and most of them would be runs. And so we expected, again, in that Bears game, a lot of running from Colin Kaepernick. And it was the opposite. The 49ers fooled everybody, and it was a passing game for him. And he passed the ball really well. I forget what his yardage was, 285, really good passer rating, couple of touchdowns, a lot of big throws. I wonder whether that would be sort of the scenario if Trey Lance made a surprise start early in the season. We expect a lot of runs. The opponent expects a lot of runs. And then he turns around and throws the ball all over the field because of that. So I can definitely see that happening too.
Well, then we'd have a little bit of element of surprise too. I mean, depending on how much he plays in the preseason, but there would just be the newness of having, defenses. They need to watch film, right? Or they're doing a whole bunch of guessing. So, I'm a big. I mean, again, Seahawks fans probably not trying to hear this, but Trey Lance in the division would be really exciting. I think. But let's swap sides of the ball, real quick. The Niners lose. Robert Saleh goes and coaches becomes the head coach of the Jets. He was a big part of why that defense was great and giving Seattle a lot of problems while he was in charge. So how is it going to look now with DeMeco Ryans being promoted? Is he going to keep things the same or what?
I think he's going to keep things the same. Again, we haven't watched enough practice to really make any big judgments. I'm basing that off of the personnel that they brought in the offseason. And, they made a big change. I guess it was 2 years ago when they brought in Chris Kosurik as their defensive line coach, and they went to a more wide 9, and they brought in a whole bunch of personnel to sort of fit that. Everybody that they brought in this offseason sort of fits the status quo for what they do. So there didn't seem to be any big changes in the works. I would note that they brought in a lot of cornerbacks who are known for press coverage. Jason Barrett was really good at that early in his career. A couple of the guys that they drafted are that way too. And that always kind of surprised me, is that, a secondary with Richard Sherman in it didn't do as much press man-to-man stuff as I thought that they would. And maybe that's something that they do more this year. So that would probably be the biggest change. But DeMeco Ryans is interesting. He's going to talk for the first time as defensive coordinator this week. And I'm anticipating that, because he's not known for being A loud guy, a rah-rah guy. I've talked to him a couple of times. Not the greatest interviews on the planet. He's very low key. He's very calm. That's sort of his calling card. But he's also very smart, and he's got this, like I said, this calmness about him. He doesn't raise his voice a lot, but when he talks, he's, since he was a high school player, everybody's ears perk up and they listen to him. And that's the way it's been as a position coach, linebackers coach, and that's the way it's probably going to go for him as a defensive coordinator. But it's going to be a little bit of a different tone, message to the fans, I think. I just wonder. I'm sure the PR staff wants him to be Mr. Personality and whatnot, but that's just not how he is. So it's going to be, to me, being in the business forever, I know he's being coached up for this first press conference. I just don't want him to be come off as false. I want him to be himself, and I think he will be. But it'll be fun to watch.
Let's look at this Niners secondary, because you guys got some dogs, some hounds. You got some interesting names, Tavares Moore, Jimmy Ward, Verrett, Mosley, Tart. Is this going to be an elite secondary for this 2021 campaign, you think?
Yeah, they've got some experience back there. I mean, Verrett, Tart, and Jimmy Ward are, approaching 30 if they're not all 30 at this point. And so that's nice to have. And they communicate well. They played well. They played a while together. It's that other cornerback spot that I think is going to be the question mark. Is Emmanuel Mosley going to hold that all season? They brought in a third-round pick, Ambry Thomas, who I think this is a great year for them to sort of bring along a rookie into that spot, because they do have the experience in those other places. So that's what I sort of expect as the year goes on. This guy, Ambry Thomas, gets in and eventually becomes one of the starters by the end of the season. Tarvarius Moore also is interesting. He's sort of a free safety, played free safety, known for his speed. And he said at the end of the season that he was going to add some bulk so that he can play more strong safeties. So, be an option to play opposite Jimmy Ward. And he was true to his word. He was 10 pounds heavier for this minicamp practice the other day. And so it'll be interesting to see whether he's kept his speed. He hasn't been the greatest tackler on the planet. So hopefully with that bulk comes a little bit of better tackling ability too. But if he can put that all together, that's a lot of speed back there that can cover a lot of ground. Like I said, it might make for more opportunities to play more press. They should be more versatile back there as well.
I'm just more excited with the Seahawks and Niners matching up now. It's going to be even more fun because, DK's back in the lab. He's ready to work out and dominate again this season. This is going to be a fun matchup.
Oh yeah, no, I can't wait for it. I'm always looking forward to the Niner games. I mean, in 2019, I think that's where Niners fans probably think the defense should get back to. Obviously, that's when it was great. This pass rush was always the scariest thing about that. It was like you're just sending killers, at Russell Wilson pretty much every snap. Now, a lot of those bodies from that 2019 team are gone up front. So can they still recreate, that vibe, assuming healthy Bosa and whatever, can they get back to that in 2021?
Well, yeah, it's a big assumption, and they are making that assumption. I mean, Bosa it wasn't just the run-of-the-mill ACL; it was the ACL plus. I don't know what the other, whether it was another ligament that was torn. They've been very closed-lipped about it, but it wasn't like I said, the one that might take 8 months and the guy's back to normal the next year. So they didn't do a lot at that position, and they rely on that position quite a bit. And it's not just Bosa. It's Bosa and Dee Ford. Both were hurt all last season. Dee Ford had a mysterious back issue. He's still working his way back from. No one's quite sure whether he's even going to play again. So they brought in Samson Ekubom from the Rams in free agency. And so they're counting on him, who hasn't been, a full-time starter in his career. But that's really it. It's Bosa coming back from an injury, Ford coming back from an injury, Ekubom, and really not a lot else. So you're absolutely right. In 2019, the calling card from this team was its defensive line, just getting after guys, sending pass rushers in waves, and those edge players, Bosa and Ford, were so fast, and you had DeForest Buckner in the middle. There's no DeForest Buckner. Bosa and Ford are question marks. The only guy that's coming back in full right now is Eric Armstead from that group of 4 from 2019. So to me, that's the biggest question mark in this group. What is Bosa going to be his 2019 self? Is that going to happen? From the drop of the hat from week 1 on, or is it going to take him 8 games to get back to his form? And if that's the case, they're not the same team, because that was very much what they were identified with during that Super Bowl run.
Yeah, not to belabor the Jimmy G point, but I do think that's also an issue there is, yeah, Kyle Shanahan's like, he cites how many games they've won with Jimmy, but it's like, yeah, you also did that with like a top 3 defense too. Like, it wasn't like Jimmy G was slinging you to a bunch of games. I know he was great against the Saints in that 2019 year, but like, no, the defense was kicking ass and taking names. Can you win? Can you still win with, like, I would love for maybe Kyle Shanahan can't answer this honestly, but I'd love for him to answer like, hey, can you still win as many of the games as you did with Jimmy G if you don't have a top 2 pass defense?
Yeah, and they might find out the answer, and I think we know the answer. He wouldn't have traded up from pick 12 to pick 3 to get a quarterback if he thought that Jimmy G is going to win those games on his own. That doesn't happen.
I want to talk about a couple guys that the Seahawks stole from the Niners in free agency this year. Let's stay with the D-lines to run that theme real quick. What are the Seahawks getting in Kerry Hyder?
I mean, Kerry Hyder is awesome. I mean, he's one of these under-promise, over-deliver types. Nobody, all those injuries I just cited last year, it forced Kerry Hyder, who they thought was going to be like an interior pass-down rusher. That's probably his best spot. They had to play him almost exclusively at defensive end, and he was great. I mean, he's not, a blow off the line and whatever. A good 10-yard split is. What he is a blue collar guy who's always kind of fighting to get to the quarterback, and those guys end up getting 10 sacks a year because they don't stop, they don't quit, and so I think he's going to be a great fit. They're going to love him there. Teammates are going to love him. Coaches are going to love him. He reminds me of Ronald Blair for the 49ers, who's a guy who, second team guy, but ended up playing a lot of snaps and making a lot of big plays. So he's Mr. Effort. He's had a really kind of star-crossed career to this point, where every time it looks like he's on the verge of, making a name for himself, he got hurt or something happened. So he's a good guy to root for, and you guys will like him too. He's a good interview as well.
He's undrafted, right?
Yes, isn't he?
I believe he was undrafted.
I think so. If he was, it wasn't a high pick.
Yeah, because I remember him talking about like that. When you say effort, like he seems like a guy who's like always fighting. Because when you come in the league at that level,
you gotta fight.
You never feel safe,
right?
Exactly. Like you always feel like you gotta. Like Doug Baldwin was like that too. He was always fighting. Even if he was the highest paid receiver on the team and the number 1 target. It's like, no, I'm still fighting for a gig. I think that's why shout out to the homie Jason Jenks. When he wrote the story of Doug retiring, it was called, the headline is Doug Baldwin is done fighting, right? Because he couldn't play football without fighting. Like that was just his mindset. So if we get that from Kerry, that would be great. Let's switch to the other guy, Ahkello Witherspoon, man, who made his first headline here in Seattle when he said that when healthy, I'm the best cornerback in the league. What do you make of such a confident statement from young Ahkello?
I usually don't like self-aggrandizing like that, but I tell you what, at the end of this last season, he was on fire. I mean, he was confident. You saw that against the Seahawks. He was talking smack to DK and all that stuff. He was playing as well as I'd seen a cornerback play in a long time. The issue was that it was sporadic over his career. I mean, there were stretches of games where he played really well and stretches of games where he didn't play well, and he got pulled out of a lot of games. I mean, he was in the doghouse quite a bit with Kyle Shanahan. It started in 2018, and you guys saw it in 2019 in a game up in Seattle where he was pulled, and then he was pulled the following week in the playoffs against the Vikings. Now, he would tell you, and I think he referred to this recently with the media in Seattle, that he's been hurt a couple of times, and so he was playing with a foot injury, I think, at that point. And he said it affected him, and that's why he didn't play very well, and that's why he was pulled. That's been an issue with him. If he's not 100%, he's not playing well. And as you guys know, in the NFL, it's very rare that you're even close to 100%. So that to me is something that he needs to learn how to do. Play at that high level, even when everything is not exactly perfect for him physically.
Yeah, he mentioned that he had 2 injuries that were really bad. He didn't specify what they were, but then I went back and found your story where he told you he had a hole in his quad and a sprain, some type of sprain on his foot, maybe a toe, I believe, all on the same leg. So like the cat's out of the bag, Ahkello, I'm sorry. But I guess that is important context. But with him getting pulled specifically in those games in 2019, it seems like maybe I'm just a little more empathetic to some of these coaches, but like in 2019, that regular season finale, he gave up a touchdown to DK in the 4th quarter, and he got pulled, right? And then the very next week, 2 weeks later, they play the Vikings. He gives up a touchdown to Stephon Diggs in the 1st quarter, and he gets pulled. Those seem like some quick leashes, man, or some short leashes, considering the opponents he was going up against, Diggs and DK. Like, what was up with that?
Well, I mean, I think there was the injury that he was dealing with, and I think there was a short leash. I mean, he had gotten pulled the previous year too, before a game in Green Bay, nationally televised game against Green Bay, and we never really got the full story on what it was. It wasn't a physical issue. It was more of we're going to teach this young guy a lesson type of thing. Like, they didn't like the way he was conducting himself. And that's why he didn't play in that game. And it came back to bite them in that game because I think it was Jimmy Ward who got the start at cornerback and played well, but then he got hurt, and they brought in another guy, Greg Maben. I think he's been up in Seattle a couple of times, and Maben just got torched by Aaron Rodgers, and it allowed the Packers to come back and win that game. So it really the 49ers went into it hoping to teach Witherspoon a lesson, and they ended up shooting themselves in the foot by doing so. So that was sort of it. I mean, like I said, if it wasn't for Dante Pettis, I would say that Ahkello Witherspoon was in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse more than any other player over the last few years. So he didn't have a lot of leash to work with. So when he started to struggle in those games, it was a quick hook and he was out. You could say that backfired too, because Emmanuel Moseley took over, and Emmanuel Moseley was in coverage on that fateful play to Tyreek Hill in the Super Bowl, which really was the turning point in that game. So there was a lot of mind games going on, and I'm not sure the 49ers always came out on top of the mind games with Ahkello Witherspoon.
Oh, it sounds like they 100% did not come out on here losing games. I mean, they should have lost the game against the Seattle when they pulled Ahkello. Like if I don't know, if Jacob Hollis was 2 inches taller, maybe they lose that game too. Like that. They 100% seems like they have the short end on the stick when Ahkello's supposed to be the one learning the lesson.
I do want to stick. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't even bring up the game against Miami this past year. If you
oh my God,
look at that game, that's another thing where the 49ers had to go to. You're going to think that I'm making this up, but I don't think I am. It's like their 5th string cornerback because they had so many injuries. And Ahkello was one of the guys who decided they thought that he was going to be able to go that week. He said he couldn't go. And so that already was, looked at, suspiciously. And then when they started to get torched early in the game, he came in and played the rest of the game and played pretty well, which sort of, for a lot of people, emphasized that maybe he could have started from the get-go and they wouldn't have gotten into the hole that they did. So there's a lot of water that's going underneath that bridge there. But the bottom line is that he is a supremely talented and smart guy. He's just got to kind of bring it all together and be consistent.
Let's talk about another corner and DJ Reed, who's with the 49ers formerly, and Pete Carroll went after him, even though he had an injury. Were you surprised with what DJ was able to do with the Seahawks? And did you see some of that while you were covering the team with him?
I did, but I didn't see it at the position that he's been playing for the Seahawks. He was an outside cornerback at Kansas State, undersized. So the 49ers thought, okay, this is going to be a good nickel cornerback or even a free safety. And he played a little bit of both early on, I think his rookie year. And he seemed to be much more comfortable at nickel cornerback. He's a feisty guy, rough and tumble guy, not shy about tackling, any of that. So he's perfect for the nickel spot. And the 49ers were really dubious whether he could be an outside cornerback. And he played well there. So, to me, he's a guy that probably a nickel cornerback, an inside cornerback, truly. But it just kind of shows you who he is, his personality. I mean, we're talking about fighters and underdogs, scrappers. That seems to be DJ Reed in a nutshell. He's not a guy who's going to shy away from challenges or contact. So I imagine Pete Carroll just loves to have that type of personality, even if he's giving up a few inches to a receiver every now and then. He'd much rather have that personality in the secondary.
That's 100% right. I definitely agree with you on that point. I do want to get your thoughts on the whole NFC West. And now that there's 17 games this year, it's going to be weird when you say, oh, this team's going to win such and such games. But I want you to rank from worst to best. Yeah, I put you on the spot. You know how it is. Usually we just say, hey, what's the Niners record going to be? But this year, I want you to rank from 4th down to 1. So who do you have number 4 in the NFC West going down to number 1?
Well, I guess I have to put the Cardinals at number 4, even though they really give the 49ers fits every time they play them. To me, that's a team that just needs to shore up its defense. And they've tried to do that with some draft picks over the years. I'm not sure they've been all that successful there. So I feel like that's still the weak link for them, and why they might not ultimately go very far. So I'll go the Cardinals, but I mean, I'm going to give myself the wiggle room. Like, they could easily be number 1 on the list, or they could be in this gaggle of teams that are fighting at the end. So I would go 4 is Arizona. I'd go 3 is Rams. They lost an awful lot in free agency this year. I mean, Stafford steals all the headlines, and deservedly so. And that's going to be, make or break for them. But there's a lot of talent that they don't have this year that they've had in previous years that maybe didn't get as much notice as it should have. And then, the 2 big boys, the 2 traditional heavyweights there at the end.
Matt, this is tough.
I'm not trying to skirt it, but I just didn't follow the 49ers had so much news that I didn't really follow the Seahawks closely in what they did in the offseason. So I don't know whether they improved, whether they're still the same. To me, Russell Wilson is always the kind of the class of the division. So that's good for a winning record right there. I can only imagine that his rapport with DK Metcalf gets better. So I'll put Seattle at 3rd, and then the 49ers Seattle at 2, and then the 49ers at 1.
I can't be surprised with that. I understand. I feel you. I would probably, that's a tough one. I don't even know.
So I want to ask this then, Matt.
You can't even answer your own question.
Well, no one really knows whether they got better or not. I wrote that they got slightly better, I think, last week. But here's what I do. So I think both me, you, and Jordan, I think we all had to do, Jordan Rodriguez covers the Rams. We all had to do season preview things when the schedule came out. I think we all said 12-5. I legit think we all gave the same projection. So in your 12-5, are you projecting that the quarterback in week 18, that sounded weird to say, are you projecting the quarterback in week 18 is still Jimmy G?
Well, that was David Lombardi, my colleague who did the 12-5. But I definitely noticed that the 3 of you had 12-5, and probably if we had a Cardinals writer, he would have, he or she would have had them going 10-7 or 11-6 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I feel like if they are 12-5, that means that Jimmy G is probably the quarterback for the whole season. Because if they don't have that sterling record, that means that Jimmy G probably got pulled at some point. That would be the way that he gets pulled. Either he gets hurt or he just doesn't play very well. If he's not playing very well, they're not winning. And if they're not winning, they don't go 12-5.
Yeah. Or Trey Lance comes in and just kills it. Yeah, you never know.
Absolutely. I mean, I think these are all plausible scenarios. He's looked good. I remember watching Alex Smith the last time that they had a really high draft pick. And Smith was young too. Smith was only 20 years old when he was drafted back in 2005, number 1 overall pick. And he was like I always described him as right after a horse is born and the baby horse tries to get up on its legs and it's all teetering and stuff. He did not look the part. Trey Lance looked like Bambi. And to his credit, he got his legs later in his career and he just retired recently. Long, successful.
With both of his legs, he retired with, which was not guaranteed.
Years ago. Yeah, we shouldn't make leg jokes with Alex Smith. I mean, talk about guts and grit that he showed. But my point is that he did not. It looked like it was going to take him a long time to learn the position when he came into the league. I don't get that sense from Trey Lance. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but I don't think it's going to be 3 or 4 years where it takes him to kind of figure out how to run an NFL offense.
I think we started with Julio Jones here, and now coming back to it before we get you out of here, I think I found the real reason that if the Niners are going to say, "No, we're good, we don't need Julio," it's because of a guy that no one's talking about. It's River Craycraft on the 49ers. Shout out a Wazoo alum. Shout out River. I mean, come on, Matt. Like that. There's the future All Pro right there on the team, and future punt returner. I think he should be as well. Like Niners are sleeping on River. Am I right?
Well, I'm sure the 49ers are going to be really disappointed that you figured out their secret weapon there. But you're absolutely right. I mean, he does a lot of things that the 49ers need. They need a slot guy. I was talking about their need for a number 3 receiver. It's really a slot that they need. They don't have a really good punt returner either. So if you can do both on this team, that's a key to the roster. He's not at the top of my list as the guy who becomes the number 3 guy, but he's certainly got a shot.
Hey man,
call me up, man. I might be able to return a few punts. Man. I won't be able to get hit, but
what did that one dude say? He needs to add 10 pounds. I think you need like 50. 30. Nah, bro. These guys are some big dudes. I think you're the same size as the guy the Niners the Rams drafted. Tutu. Yeah, brother Tutu, like 160. Man, that's just. I don't know, man. It's
all about the 10-yard split these days. The 40 is like 10 years ago. It's 10-yard split. If you got a good 10-yard split, you're golden.
There we go.
All right, man. That is Matt Barrows, and he covers the 49ers for The Athletic, man. Does a great job. Like, if you guys are really curious on whether Jimmy G stinks, whether he's going to be gone, whether he's going to be great, Matt's got that whole situation covered. It's a really fascinating one, and whoever's the quarterback, however it goes, I think we can all agree their quarterback situation will have a lot to do with the final standings of the division. Like one way or another, whether Jimmy G's great or Trey Lance is great or whether they suck or whatever, that's going to matter because they can be it can be the best team in the league, the Niners can, and could be the worst team in the division, just depending on how things go. So I'm very excited for that to shake out, man. Thank you, Matt, so much. Let's get one more book plug in here. Let me get what's the title? I don't know if we said the title.
It's If These Walls Could Talk, and it's got a whole bunch of words after that, but I can't remember what they are. But if you look it up on Amazon or any bookseller, put in my name, Matt Barrows, it'll pop right up. So Father's Day's coming up. If you need that gift, it's a pretty good one.
All right, man. We appreciate you coming on the podcast. Hopefully, we're traveling this year in 2021. Hopefully, I get to see you, and you get to come up here, man. So, thank you again. Thank you guys for turning into the Seahawks Man to Man podcast, and for follow us on Twitter. Follow Chris, even though he's not verified. Matt, are you verified?
Oh yeah. I've been verified for about a decade or so.
There we go. Decade in the game. Thank you guys. We'll catch you on our next installment of our NFC West Roundup with the homie Jordan Rodriguez covering the Rams. On that note, we're out.